Todd Wilson's Georgia Journal, a very special edition this time. As we're paying tribute to veterans, we're going to take you to the open house at the Perry-Houston County Airport, and as a bonus, we're going to take you on a flight on a classic Boeing B-17 World War II era bomber. It's all coming your way right now here on this edition of Todd Wilson's Georgia Journal. Glad to have you along.
The first weekend in November brought hundreds of visitors to the Perry-Houston County Airport for the annual open house. Many veterans, families, and aircraft enthusiasts came out to see the different airplanes on display. Some are housed at the Perry Airport year-round. Others were there for inspection, some even offering flights. There was a rare vintage biplane from the late 1920s and even ultralight experimental aircraft. The Museum of Aviation even brought their traveling F-15 cockpit simulator. The main interest, though, it appeared, for the vintage World War II aircraft, which were brought in by the Collings Foundation during their Wings of Freedom tour. For the last 24 years, the Collings Foundation has lovingly cared for, maintained, and flown historic aircraft that date back over 80 years of living flight history. During this year's tour, they're featuring a P-51C model, the TP-51C Mustang. Of course, the Mustang, perhaps the most recognized fighter of the Second World War. It's powered by a Packard Merlin 1,300 horsepower engine. The Foundation's C model is the world's only dual-control P-51C. In fact, there are less than 5 of the early B and C models still taking to the air. The Mustang is a durable, capable, long-range fighter, which was armed with 6 wing-mounted 50 caliber machine guns. Two bombers were featured during the open house as well. The only B-24J model flying today in the world, Witchcraft. The Liberator was developed by Consolidated and was powered by 4 1,200 horsepower Pratt & Whitney engines. It was armed with 10 50 caliber machine guns for defense and could carry almost 29,000 pounds of bombs at a top speed of 290 miles an hour. The Collings B-24 Witchcraft, it was built in August of 1944 and would see combat action for the British in the Royal Air Force in the Pacific Theater. Now, over 18,000 B-24 Liberators were built during the war. However, today, there are only 16 complete B-24s in the world and only 2 in flying condition. The second bomber is one of the most recognizable from the Second World War, the Boeing B-17 Flying Fortress. Named the 909, the Collings B-17G model is one of just 10 Fortresses that still take to the skies. This plane was completed by the Douglas Aircraft Company and completed on April 7, 1945. It would be used for transport and air-sea rescue operations in service after the war, but in 1952 was used during atomic testing. In fact, it would be exposed to 3 separate nuclear explosions. After a 13-year cool-down period, it wound up being sold for scrap. But it was refurbished and for 20 years was used in helping fight forest fires. The Collings Foundation bought her in 1986 and restored the aircraft to its original wartime configuration. The B-17 could carry almost 36,000 pounds of bombs, was armed with 13 50 caliber machine guns, has a top speed of 250 miles an hour from its 4 1,200 horsepower engines. Of the more than 12,000 B-17s that were produced, less than 10 are still flying. It's a rare sight to catch one of these in the air, but we'll be doing just that. Take you along for the ride when we come back with more of Todd Wilson's Georgia Journal. Welcome back to Todd Wilson's Georgia Journal and our visit to the open house at the Perry-Houston County Airport. We're going to bring you a rare look inside the B-17, the 909, during flight. I was lucky enough to hitch a ride from Perry to Auburn University Regional Airport, and then we climbed aboard the 909. We belted in our seats in the crew area and then taxied down the runway.
Rolling on inside this Boeing B-17, taking a little hop from Alabama to Perry, Georgia, and the 2013 edition of the Perry-Houston County Airport open house. And well, we're basically back in the Bay area. The ball turret just to my right, machine gun positions here on either side. One of the reasons it was called the Flying Fortress. We'll be scouting out more parts of the airplane shortly as we're just about to take off.
It's a loud, kind of jolting experience inside the plane on the taxiway. Soon enough, though, the throttle was pushed and we soon found an escape to the confines of gravity. And once in the air, we got to unbuckle and walk around and explore this wonderful flying museum. The fortress, well, it's well named because it is armed to the teeth. The machine guns positioned around the aircraft from nose to tail were there to help defend against attack from enemy fighters. Another defensive position is the ball turret located in the belly of the plane. The ball turret gunner would sit in an almost fetal position during missions, some lasting as long as 8 hours. Seated in the radio operator's position is a gentleman we'll be getting to know more about coming up, Crawford Hicks. He's a World War II veteran and a B-17 pilot whose story is an inspiration. He flew 9 successful missions over Nazi-held territory, but on his 10th would be shot down and captured. He'll spend the next 11 months as a prisoner of war. The radio operator's area had a removable roof, almost a throwback to the open cockpits of early biplanes. As we move forward, there's the bomb bay area, where tons of bombs would be loaded for transport to targets in enemy territory. It's a very tight walk across the catwalk to reach the flight deck. That's where the pilot and co-pilot control the plane. And also where one of the crew manned twin 50 caliber machine guns in a turret. On now to the nose of the B-17, where there are still more machine guns. 4, in fact, 2 positioned outside and then 2 underneath. And also in the nose, a once top-secret piece of equipment, the Norden bomb sight. It's actually one of the first, earliest forms of computer. And with a clear view out of the nose and below, the bombardier would sight on targets below and then drop the payload with devastating effects. The flight from Auburn to Perry was near perfect. Some turbulence did cause the plane to hop, but it was an amazing experience. It was easy to imagine what the brave flight crews endured during a mission. Now, of course, we didn't have the fear of flak bursts or enemy fighters, but there was time to enjoy the view of the changing fall colors below, the Chattahoochee River, farms, lakes, even a pass in tribute over Robins Air Force Base after we returned to Houston County. My dad happened to work on B-17s when he first started at Robins Air Force Base way back in 1952. Well, once the pass was completed, we headed back southeast towards Perry and the Houston County Airport. Sadly, the flight ended far too soon, but after one of the smoothest landings I've ever experienced, it was time to check out more of the open house. And when we come back on Todd Wilson's Georgia Journal, well, we'll get the story directly from Crawford Hicks and his wife. They both have some interesting stories to share. That's all coming up. You stick around. Welcome back to Todd Wilson's Georgia Journal and our trip to the Perry Houston County Airport Open House 2013. Now, the ride on the B-17 was spectacular, but was made even more special because we got to fly with a World War II veteran, a former B-17 pilot, and his wife. Crawford Hicks was a pilot of the Flying Fortress and shared some of his war memories.
The longest was 8 hours. It was about 9 hours, really, to Berlin. We hit Berlin 4 times from Britain. We were from I was flying during the time before D-Day occurred. So all of Europe was occupied by the Germans. So the front line for the fight was on the coast of France in Belgium. So we had to fly. When we hit the front line, we were over France. So it was something like between 8 and 9 hours for the longest ones, and I think the shortest was about.
Now, you and your crew had 10 missions, but those were 10 successful missions. On the 10th mission, when was it you were shot down?
On the 10th mission, on the way home. I flew the first one by myself, but the rest of we had 9 missions as a crew. And on the last mission, we had hit Aschersleben, Germany, on the way home. And we're flying about 27,000 feet, and an Me-109, that's a fighter Messerschmitt German 109, hit us from head on. It hit the right wing and set the 2 right engines on fire. So I feathered the propeller. That means turning the propeller so that the edge is turning in the direction we're going, so that they didn't create a drag, or least amount of drag. And then the fighters made another pass and hit the bombardier with one of their shells, 20 millimeter explosive shell. It hit him in the chest, in the body, and he was dead on the airplane. So the rest of the 9 of us got out. We all bailed out. I kept the airplane level, and everybody got out, and then I got out.
And then you would spend the next 14 months?
No, a total of 11 months.
11 months?
Right. At Stalag Luft 3, which was the German Air Force operated prison camp near Breslau, Poland. That was in eastern Germany to the east, and I believe northeast of Berlin. I believe that's what it was. But anyway, to the east of Berlin, near Breslau, Poland. Real cold over there, and this is the camp from which the Great Escape occurred. And the Great Escape was real. It was the movie, of course, was made about it, but it really occurred, and it occurred from that camp. That camp had 5 compounds, each of which had about 10 acres of land, so that size. And the Great Escape was made from that compound in March, before May, or June, when I got there. And I need to tell this because it's a pretty sad story. 73, my figures were were given 73 prisoners. Most of all of them were British. Escaped. 20 of them were captured immediately. 50 of them were put into a barn and murdered by the guards we were told at the specific instructions of Hitler. And 3 of them got back to Allied control.
So out of 73?
Out of 73 of them, yes. That's all that got out.
And the movie probably doesn't detail anything.
Well,
of
it
the
gives
horrors
some of that, but not all the gory details. It shows the barn and things like that. But it was it was cold over there, and getting away from there, you had to go a long way over enemy territory to get back home. So we were told not to try to escape, to stay right there.
And eventually you were liberated.
It's right. And General Patton, this is important, I think. General Patton came in with his tanks at Moosburg, Germany, which is north of Munich. And he came with his tanks on the 29th of April, 29th of April, yes. And I broke the gate down and walked in, and I walked right beside the gentleman. 3 stars were beautiful, and we were all crying too. We saw the flag go up. It was good. It was good. But I now need to tell you one story that, because I think it puts a picture on the picture. We had a march, a forced march. We had to leave our camp because the Russians were coming from the east. And in the middle of the night, this is 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, we'd been walking for 12 hours or so, resting once in a while, yes. We stopped for a rest, and a German lady came out of her home with a pitcher of hot water and poured hot water into our cups until all the water was all gone, just to give us a drink. And she did this of her own accord. Nobody asked her to. Another time we stopped, and a lady let me into her house, and she gave me some potato soup, which was potatoes and water, no stock, just potatoes and water. But it was like nectar. But the whole story, I'm telling you the story, is that this is the attitude of the Germans.